Welcome to Your Money Map. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. We are, as always, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income, and you might not be able to tell it immediately, but we have gotten our act together and taken this show on the road. I am joined by the CEO of the Alliance for Lifetime Income, Jean Statler.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here in Detroit.
Well, that's where we are, but we're not just in Detroit. We are in Detroit on the 5th floor of the Ford Miller. We're in the Miller Lite Arena, Miller Lite Lounge at the Ford Stadium, and it is incredible. We're here because the Rolling Stones are playing here, and the Alliance for Lifetime Income is sponsoring this tour for the second time. Tell us why this partnership works for you.
Well, as you know, the Alliance for Lifetime Income is a consumer education campaign that raises awareness to consumers about how to get income in retirement and how to prepare for it. And so this was a perfect marriage, if you will, when this opportunity came in front of us to get with for a number of reasons. First of all, the target audience is exactly our target audience for the Stones, 45 to 72-year-olds. We're always trying to introduce new consumers to thinking about planning in retirement. And the second reason that works well is we know that a lot of people haven't prepared and really aren't well informed about how to generate income once your paycheck quits when you retire. And then, of course, the third great reason is all of us want to live life to its fullest. Who embodies that more than Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones? Living life is how they want to live it.
Exactly, and into their 70s and beyond. If you were to take a walk outside this arena, you would see an integration from the Alliance. There's this amazing Airstream trailer where you're handing out a lot of swag and t-shirts, but you're also talking to people about protected income in retirement, about the need to figure out what you're going to need to live on in retirement, and then make sure there is enough money coming in. When people approach you at all of the Stones concerts, what do they want to know? What are they saying?
Well, interestingly, I'd say Stones fans are really nice people, and they come very early to experience the whole environment before a Stones concert. And because this is one of those things that they have on their bucket list. I got to go to the Stones concert, for my check off the bucket list. And so when we do interact with them at with games and contests and trivia about the Stones, and if you get it right, then you get some swag. But then they're just milling around, and they do engage with you about what retirement is about, how they plan for retirement. And the thing that really is interesting is there's so many who haven't thought about it, about how do I generate income? And the other thing is that a number of them say, I can't afford to retire. And that's really a growing problem because we're going to, in 2024, reach a height of more boomers, more people turning 65 than ever before in our nation's history. And so this is something that we're trying to get out in front of and talk to them and educate them about how to enjoy retirement, how to think about income in retirement. And that's what the Alliance really is all about.
We've undergone this shift in our country in the past few decades, going from a series of pensions that supported most people in retirement along with Social Security to a 401k system. And people have to figure out how to take their 401k and stretch that money out and make it last the next 30 years, 40 years, even more for some people. But there are people out there, independent contractors, actors, artists, musicians, who often don't have 401ks. I know you're focused a lot on helping them.
Right, and that really became an added benefit when we became the sole sponsor for the Rolling Stones, because the head of production for the Rolling Stones who we interact with and who we have on the show a little bit later asking some questions, is somebody who had thought about, I am an independent contractor, and he said his father helped him really look at, if you're going to do this, kid, you're going to have to take care of yourself. And so he introduced him to a financial planner and then started investing wisely. And in fact, he has a couple of annuities, which is really one of the 3 ways to get protected income. You can get Social Security, you can get a pension, and the only other way to get some guaranteed income when you retire is with an annuity. And he early on got a couple of annuities, has a couple more that has helped him get through this last year and a half, 14, 15 months during the pandemic when the whole music industry shut down. So with this partnership, he's really brought to light for us the importance of educating the independent contractors. So together, we've put together an online version of financial education about how to save and how to invest and what the steps are to go through. And it's on the EverFi program. Opie is probably our best advocate for the need for everyone to really think about when the paycheck stops, how do you support yourself?
We are going to dig into that topic today. I've got another guest here with me, Miata Edoga, and she'll be joining me in just a second, but you'll also be back as we wrap up the show. So I'm gonna once again say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sponsoring the tour and the program, and I'll see you in a few.
I look forward to the concert tonight too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay.
My guest is Miata Edoga. She is the CEO and founder of Abundance Bound, and she has spent the past 2 decades helping non-traditional earners, all types, freelancers, artists, musicians, get a grip on their own finances so that they can weather not just the ups and downs in their employment through the years, but also get through retirement with enough money to actually enjoy it, much like the people here at this concert. Miata, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jean.
I want to remind everyone that this program is interactive, and we would love it if you have questions for Miata or questions for me, that you chime into our chat. Just type them into the chat as you always do, and we'll be happy to answer them. We welcome you whether you are watching us on Facebook or watching us on LinkedIn. But let me start with you, Miata. Why did you decide to make independent contractors your focus?
Because, Jean, I'm an independent contractor myself, so I am also an actor. Huh. And what happened is that, you go to school for years and then you train and you study for years. And when I began my professional career, what I realized is that as prepared as I was in terms of the craft, I was miserably prepared when it came to money. And I got into quite a bit of trouble. I ended up thousands of dollars in credit card debt, a little more than $80,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
And I reached the place where what I understood was that if I didn't figure out money, the dream was over, and I think that that's a place that so many artists get to. And as I dove into my own learning and really fixing my own situation, I started thinking to myself, why didn't somebody teach me this, right? And I knew that I wanted to make a difference in my own community. So,
how are the issues different if you're an independent worker, if you're a creative?
Yeah, I think it is fundamentally, right, that if you are a traditional earner, you have a paycheck and a stability that makes your life like this, right? As an independent worker, a creative, a gig economy worker, your income is always going to do this. And what I say to people is that no matter how much you love a roller coaster, right, eventually it's going to make you sick, right? And so what we have to figure out is even though we earn like this, how do we live like this? And that requires us to have tremendous clarity about what is actually happening in our lives. How are we spending? That is probably the most critical question, right? Then we can look at how are we earning and try to stabilize the two.
I think that what you're saying not only has relevance for all of those creatives and independent workers, but 4.4 million people left their jobs just last month, and it has a lot of relevance for them too. So let's get tactical.
Okay.
If you are trying to level things out, if you're trying to get yourself on some sort of a plan when you have an irregular income, where do you start?
Okay. So what I want everybody to recognize is the fact that when it comes to money, we are extremely emotional, right? And there can be, therefore, a tendency to allow our emotions to lead. And that is the last thing that we want to be leading when it comes to our finances. So tactically, what we want is we want clarity. We want as much information as possible. So where we're going to start is we're actually going to start by getting really clear on how are you spending.
Okay.
Right? And what we often do is because we're unsure about how we're earning, we feel like the spending piece is out of our control. But actually, let's separate them both. And let's realize that how we're earning is one thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to focus on getting absolute clarity on how we're spending.
So does that mean tracking it? Do you use an app? Do you use pencil and paper? I mean, I've gone through this exercise of tracking your spending with people. It's at the heart of the coaching that we do at Her Money, and it is eye-opening. If you've never tracked your spending, it's like a wake-up call.
It is absolutely eye-opening. Now, what I want the non-traditional earner to do is I want you to look back at the last 6 months of your life.
Okay.
And I need to ask you to be a detective, not a judge, right? Because what's going to happen is as you look at what you've been doing, those emotions and I've been spending what on what is going to start happening. But all we're doing is we're looking to see what has been so. You've done the best you can with the information that you've had, right? So we're just going to forgive ourselves and look at the last 6 months. If we're willing to look at the last 6 months precisely, we can really get very clear averages around what our lives are costing us. And often I want to point out that non-traditional earners tend to also have ways they spend that are very different from traditional earners as well. So for instance, as an actor, I have to spend money investing in my business. I have to spend money on training. I have to spend money on marketing materials. I generally will have an agent or a manager that I have to pay a commission. When you have a regular job, you don't have to pay for that job. If you pay for the job, you're generally reimbursed, right?
Right.
And so it's super important that we look to see actually what are the requirements of my life with regards to my spending. Because if I go online and I look for like, okay, what budget categories should I have, they are likely not going to include your headshots, your equipment.
Right, so you start with reality and then you can make changes from there to tweak your budget to bring it into line with what you can afford based on your resources.
Absolutely. So once I get clear on how I have been spending, right, and I bring that awareness, that consciousness, at that point I can make decisions about how will I choose to spend moving forward. Right? So what I'm going to be doing is saying, what am I willing and able to change? once I look at my spending, what am I willing and able to change?
It's an interesting phrase, willing and able, because there are some expenditures that are not in your control.
Absolutely.
Right? We just came out of a pandemic. We've had big healthcare expenses. Maybe we've had, I don't know, emergencies happen.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with those?
Okay, so we have to stop deciding that because we can't plan for everything, that we can't plan for anything, right? And I think that that's a distinction that's really important. So absolutely, most of us would never have predicted a global pandemic, right? But the minute that we decide that it's all out of our control, that's the point at which life becomes incredibly challenging and really disempowering. So what I encourage our clients to look at is I want us to build what I call a planned savings, as opposed to an emergency savings, because I think that language is important, and I think that when we look at everything that happens in our lives as a crisis, right, that actually sets us up energetically for how we're moving through the world.
That makes sense.
So a planned savings is really money that I expect in the natural course of life to have to be able to spend, right? It's money that I'm planning to spend. And I want us to start by planning for the things that we can reasonably expect are going to happen. If you drive a car, it's going to break down, right? If you have teeth, which we all do, your teeth are going to need to be maintained, and you're going to have dental things. If you have a fur baby, you're going to have to take care of that fur baby. They are going to have trips to the vet. And so what we're going to do, I mean, Jean, the average American, I think, spends an average of about $1,800 a year just keeping our cars running, right? So that's $150 a month that most of us should be putting away for those kinds of expenses.
Or if you've got a home, knowing that you are going to spend 1% to 2% of the value of that home every year
Absolutely.
just on maintenance. I get where you're going with this. Let's talk about the big stuff, though. How do you do all this and then save and invest for your own retirement?
Okay. So we have to recognize, I look at retirement as being point B, right? And a lot of us are really stressed out about point B. How am I going to get to point B, right? But what we need to first make sure is that you have clarity around point A, that you have clarity around where you are right now, right? So think about what we learned probably in like the 5th grade, which is that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But we need to have both points.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate where are you right now? And this is what you and I were talking about just a couple of minutes ago. You're going to get very specific about your current numbers. And what that allows you to do is it then allows you, with a reasonable degree of accuracy, to determine where will I be 20, 30, 40 years from now, and what can I reasonably expect those expenses to be. So then I can really determine what is my monthly number going to be in retirement, right? And we're not looking for perfection, but we're looking to actually calculate that number, right? And then once I have that number, I have to start piecing together what is going to help me reach that number. So hopefully some will come from Social Security, right? But then for the independent worker, that's where we really have to look at where will the other pieces come from, right? So we are responsible for setting up our own retirement plans because we can't depend on a single employer to do that for us.
So if you don't have a 401k, if you don't have a 403b or another retirement plan where your employer is swiping money out of your paycheck so that you never see it and touch it and spend it and they put it away for you and it grows, if you don't have that, how do you set that up for yourself?
Okay. So part of the choice to be an independent worker, and I know that for some people it wasn't a choice, right? But it does mean that, yes, we have all of the beauty of that independence, but it also means a higher degree of responsibility, right? And so it starts, what I say is that your very first target is going to be setting up your own Roth IRA, your own individual retirement account.
Okay.
And we're limited to $6,000 annually, $7,000 if you're over the age of 50, but that's going to be your first target, is maxing that out every year. Then beyond that, as an independent worker, what many people don't know is that we have vehicles available to us. We have simple IRAs. There are also SEP IRAs, which are it's simplified employee pension IRAs, individual retirement plans, and also solo 401ks. And these are vehicles where you can actually save significantly more than that $6,000 annually.
Right, and I just want to clarify for everyone, all of these are the buckets. You put the money into them and then you have to decide how to invest it.
Exactly.
For people who feel like, okay, maybe I can go through the process of setting up an account, but when it comes to investing to make my money work for me, I'm at a little bit of a loss. Or for people who feel like this is all a little bit much, how do you know when you need a financial advisor in the equation to help you?
Okay. So I really believe that being an independent worker does not mean that you want to be going this financial journey alone, right? It is so important to begin to establish your financial team, and that's the people who are going to work with you to help you strategize getting from point A to point B. I want to encourage everybody to begin with financial education, because I think that while financial education is important for all of us, it is particularly important for people who have to take so much self-responsibility for where it is that they're going. So that's why we exist. That's why Abundance Bound exists. It's because we're passionate about having you make sure that you have a high degree of understanding of what are your goals, what is your specific life circumstance, so that then you can go and you can find the members of your team who are going to understand what you're up to in the world and are going to speak to those specific needs.
Gene Statler mentioned Opie, Dale Skurshef, who works with the Rolling Stones, and he and I had a conversation on this program maybe about a year and change, and he made the point that for a lot of creatives, for people whose income is not as regular, having guaranteed income in retirement feels more important, because once you've been living on the roller coaster, as you put it, for such a long time, eventually it starts to feel like too much. Do you see that among your clients, and how do you deal?
I absolutely do. And so I think what we want to be looking for is we want to be looking for the ways to bring some stability into a life path that is extremely unstable, right? So when we talk about once you know what your retirement number is, right, and you can calculate, okay, what amount of that monthly will come from Social Security. The beauty of an annuity, which is why the work that the Alliance is doing is so important, the beauty of an annuity is that you can then take another chunk of that number and essentially guarantee it, right? So that then we've now taken care of two pieces, and now we look at what's left, and that's where you're going to look at your Roth, you're going to look at if you have a SEP or a solo 401k, and we start to literally put the puzzle pieces together of how you're going to meet that number.
And that's where the growth comes from. The growth comes from maintaining that piece in the market.
Exactly.
Can we go back to Social Security for just a second?
Yeah.
It is an annuity, right? And it's an annuity that many people don't get the most out of because of the way they choose to tap Social Security. Many people take Social Security as soon as they're able to at age 62, and by doing that, they leave a lot of money on the table. And I understand if you have to feed your family, that is one thing. But if you have some flexibility in the equation, what's your suggestion for the best way to claim Social Security?
So I really believe that as you're alluding, we want to delay it as long as we possibly can, right? And in those years where you do have the option to pick up additional work, to continue earning, we want to encourage that you do that for as long as is possible. And yes, obviously, you're going to do what you have to do, but recognizing that as we get older, having the maximum amount of Social Security available to us is going to put us in the best position when our work options may be more limited.
We've got some questions that
Great.
we pulled from the crowd at various concerts. The first one actually comes from Opie, who we've been talking about today. So let's take a listen to what he has to say, and you and I will talk about it on the other side.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Dale Schurzett, the production director for the Rolling Stones. What are the top questions that a person like me, a gig worker, would ask your advisor?
It's a good question, right? But let's approach it this way. If you have an advisor and you have a regular meeting with that person every year, a financial physical, like you would see a doctor once a year for a physical, or a dentist twice a year for a cleaning or a checkup, what boxes do you have to check at that annual meeting?
Okay, so first of all, I love the question because we want to make sure you're having an annual meeting, right? We get sloppy about things like that. And I think that there can be a tendency for us to just put our money away and hope and pray that good things are happening with it. So that annual meeting actually is incredibly important. And I think that there are like 4 or 5 questions that I would encourage people to be asking. The first is really, are my investments on track for the goals that I have set? Have my goals changed at all, right? Mm-hmm. But really looking at, based on market performance, where am I in terms of where I hoped and expected to be? I think that you also want to be looking at the tax efficiency of your investments, right? So really at this point, making sure that you have a combination of tax advantaged accounts as well as just regularly taxed accounts.
Why is that so important?
Well, because a big part of what is going to affect whether you're able to meet that monthly number that we've talked about is remembering that some of the money is going to be taxed.
You know, I went through this analysis with my financial advisor, and sometimes people are surprised that I have one, but I've had one for pretty much forever. And I went through this analysis where we looked at our retirement projections, pre-tax and post-tax. It's a shocking difference.
It's a shocking difference. And I think we do have to be aware that there is a probability that tax rates are going to increase, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do think that it's particularly important that as we're meeting with our advisors, as we're planning, that we're paying attention to what funds we're going to have access to that will not be taxed versus the funds that will be.
Okay. You said 4 or 5 things. That's 2.
Yeah, so that's 2. I also believe that it's really important to look at, is your income protected, right? So we really want to be evaluating your insurance. You want to make sure that you have enough life insurance, especially if you have dependents. You want to be looking at your disability insurance. You want to be looking at your liability and umbrella policies, those kinds of things. So I think making sure that your money is safe, right? I think it's also an important time to just be looking at your asset plan, right? And to be making sure, again, like this is something where have you set the beneficiaries of your various accounts, right? Do you have a will? or a trust? Do you have a living, like do you have a medical plan for if anything were to happen to you? These are conversations that are hard to have, but we want to be having them. And I think at least once a year, that's a great time to look at where you are in your life journey and making sure that you've got plans in place for that. And I think that ties, it's kind of linked to what I would see as the fifth thing, which is how is my plan playing into my family's situation? So we have a growing number of people, I think we're referring to them as the sort of sandwich generation, right? Who are both caring for aging parents or needing to be thinking about their aging parents and are still also responsible for their children, right? And so I think just looking at your plan and seeing how is it affecting the various situations in your family? Do you have children headed to college? Do you have parents who are starting to need to look at long-term care? All of those things are very important.
Especially this year when so many adult children have boomeranged and are back in the home. I think that is a really, really important point because you don't know when they will launch again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have to really understand that launching is becoming incredibly more challenging, right? And so our role as a sort of family unit is becoming more and more important in terms of how we are planning together. And also, how are we educating our younger, our children? How are we educating them to try to make sure that they are prepared for their own futures?
All right, that's another show.
I
And we're going to have you
right?
back in order to talk about that. But I know we've got another question. This one is coming in from Dave, I believe. David, let's take a listen to what he has to say.
My name is David Ferrante. I'm from Rochester, New York. I'm 61. I'll probably retire in about 5 years. My question is, as a self-employed business person, who do I go see to make sure that my retirement is taken care of when I'm starting out my own small business? Who would help me make sure that I'm on the right path?
Another really good question. I mean, what he's basically asking you is how does he find an advisor?
Yeah, how does he find an advisor? And I think I want to just jump on two little things in his question that I think are important. One is that he asks, how do I make sure I'm on the right path, right? And I just want to caution Dave and everyone that there is no single right path. What we need to make sure that Dave identifies and that all of us identify is what is your North Star? Where are you headed? Because then there's going to be a path that is moving you towards your North Star. The other thing that he may not have been saying, but that I heard is, who do I go to make sure that my retirement is set, right? And I want to caution us that we cannot ever have a passive approach to our financial futures, right? No one, no matter how wonderful the educator or advisor, no one is going to care more about your financial future than you do. So what we're looking for is we're looking for people who are going to be on our team, but Dave is going to need to be the leader of his team. And again, that is why I absolutely believe that it starts with your education, right? It starts with making sure you understand where you are and where you're headed. And then absolutely looking for advisors who have experience with independent workers, who have experience with the non-traditional earner, who's going to focus holistically on your financial wellness, which is going to be a really important part of your plan. You want to make sure that they are really familiar with vehicles like we were talking about earlier, simple IRAs, SEP IRAs, solo 401ks, because you are not going to be able to fit into any sort of cookie cutter plan. And you want someone who has the flexibility to really work with who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. And my advice to people, no matter what profession they're in, is start with your colleagues, start with people like you, and ask for recommendations of people that they are working with that they've had a good experience with, because that's how you find somebody who is used to playing in your sandbox.
Yeah, and I think what you raised there is the importance of community, right? Because again, as a non-traditional earner, there can end up being a very isolating feeling. And you don't have the sort of built-in community that can come with going to a job day in and day out. And so you're going to have to actively build that community, and all the introverts among us have to actively go out and network with other people like us, so that together we can answer the questions that we all tend to struggle with.
100%. But David, if you are looking for some specific places to find those advisors, let me give you 3. The first one is the FPA, that's the Financial Planning Association. You can check their website. They have a zip code locator. So does NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. Those are the fee-only planners. And at hermoney.com, we've got a questionnaire and a button that just says find an advisor. It's a free service that we offer where we'll match you with people, and you don't have to be a woman to use it. You can be a guy, and that'll work as well.
And I do think that fee-based financial advisors are likely to be best for the non-traditional earner, as opposed to like a percent of assets under management, because I think that, again, you're going to need the flexibility of a plan.
Of a plan like that. All right, great. We also have a question from Tammy. Let's take a listen to what she asked.
So my name is Crystal Valentine. I'm from Clearwater, Florida. I'd like to know, as an entrepreneur, how I can maximize my medical benefits while also providing for the future and saving as much as I can, but preparing myself for unforeseen expenditures.
Great question. We also should point out we teed up Crystal's question, so apologies to Crystal for getting your name wrong out of the gate, but what do you think?
Yeah, so we want to start by actually making sure that you have health coverage, right? So this is that insurance piece where you can go to healthcare.gov, I believe, as an independent worker, and just make sure that you have a plan. But what is likely as a solo entrepreneur is that you're going to have what's called a high deductible plan, just because those costs are going to be more manageable. And I think a vehicle that's really important for people to understand is HSAs, which are health savings accounts. And that's a type of account where you can be saving up to $3,600 annually, so $300 a month, and you get a tax deduction for having that savings, and you, as long as you use that money for medical expenses, it grows and can be taken out completely tax-free.
Right, so it's essentially saving you about 25% on any healthcare expenditure.
It's a
great vehicle. And for people who believe that they will not have enough money to pay for their own healthcare, there are subsidies in place through 2022 that are more generous than you think that they're going to be. Go to healthcare.gov and take a look. As we wrap up this portion of our conversation and welcome Jean Statler back, let me just ask you for a couple of last words. What do you want the independent contractors to take away from this conversation? The independent workers, the artists, there's so many, the gig workers, as you put it. What would you like them to walk away with, and where can they find more of your wonderful advice?
So what I'd like you to walk away with is understanding that you have a relationship with money, right? It is not something that you chose, but from the day you're born until the day you leave this earth, you will absolutely have this relationship. And like every relationship, it will either be a healthy one or it will be a poor one. But that is going to depend on how you show up to the relationship.
What if you haven't done much of yet? Chantal just sent us a question and she said, what if we haven't done a great job so far? Is it too late?
It is absolutely, Chantal and everyone, it is absolutely not too late, right? In other words, Jean, have you ever had a relationship where you've made some mistakes? I mean, it would be crazy to suggest that you haven't, right?
Of course.
And so it's about saying, again, I did the best that I could, and now I am recommitting to this relationship. And so if I asked you, what does having a healthy relationship require? You would tell me. You would say it requires time, it requires honesty, it requires a willingness to learn, it requires balance, it requires a sense of humor, right? You would tell me all of those things. So what I want all of us to do is I want us to start paying attention to how are we bringing caring and a sense of humor and attention and balance and a willingness to learn to our relationship with money. That is absolutely what we focus on at Abundance Bound. So I encourage you to come to abundancebound.com and to learn about our programs, particularly our financial empowerment program, because what we are focused on is creating an environment where whatever it is you're here to do in the world, you are able to support that. And what you have to recognize is that we cannot separate our financial relationship from whatever it is we're here to do in the world. If we ignore the relationship, what you're here to do in the world will suffer, right? So I believe that we are teaching people how to strengthen this so that they can do this as powerfully and as joyfully as possible.
Absolutely. Money is the tool that helps us get what we want out of life.
Absolutely.
One more question before I let you go, because several commenters have said they have a day job, but they also have a side gig where they do their creative work. Any advice specifically for them?
Yes. So first of all, congratulations and well done, right? Because I believe financially powerful people have multiple streams of income. And I think that is just a fact. So what they've done by having a regular job is they've given themselves some degree of that stability, okay? So what it requires is it requires you to be an exceptional planner, not just around your money, but also around your time, right? So that you are giving time and space to your art and your creativity as well. But I think that what you'll often find is that the people who have created another stream of income, it actually gives them more time and energy and freedom to focus on their art. Because when I was at my worst financially, what I can tell you is that the fear that I was living in was massively negatively affecting the pursuit of my art. And so by having a willingness to create an additional stream of income, I believe that what you're doing is you're taking that burden off of your craft and your art, and that is what is going to give it the best possibility of thriving.
Well, I want to say well done to you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. You are fantastic, and we will be keeping in touch with both you and your work. I appreciate it.
It has been a gift.
Thank you. And we're going to bring Jean Statler back into the conversation here at Ford Field. The noise that you heard perhaps in the background earlier was just the crew starting to set up, get ready for this amazing concert that is going to kick off in just a few hours. Jean, I know you were listening. I saw you lurking on the sidelines there. What call to action would you like to leave all of the people who are watching today with? What would you like them, what step would you like them to take next?
Great. Well, she was impressive.
Yeah.
And her information was amazing. I think really it's about, you need to find an advisor you trust, a professional who knows you and who can talk to you in your terms. And one of the things that I am finding, this is the 12th stop for the Stones. They have one more concert after this. And one of the things we're finding is the advisors and the financial professionals are not bringing up this topic of protected income and how do you plan after when you retire. It's more about accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And we need to shift that conversation from accumulation only to we need to think about income in when they do retire and when we do retire, and how do you get that? So I think that the financial professionals need to step up, and I definitely think that a lot of the advice she just gave is spot on, and I learned quite a bit. I think so. I think that's what I'd take away.
You know, it's an interesting point. I spent, as you know, much of my career at Personal Finance magazines, and we did article after article after article about accumulation, and really have only recently started to dip a toe in the water when it comes to making that money last. But you know, because you've done the research, that running out of money in retirement is the biggest financial fear that people have, bar none.
Exactly, exactly. And talking about finances is very difficult. And I think she gave us some good tips about how to break that barrier. So I agree. Running out of money, we have twice as many people, 3 times as many people since 1990 who are going bankrupt in retirement. That's such a shame because they could have planned better and we could have helped more. So that's really what the Alliance is here to help get over that kind of bridge to a more secure financial future. And what better place to do it than here in Detroit at the Rolling Stones concert and their second to last stop on the tour.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you and to the Alliance for the education that you're giving people in this country about how to create a protected income stream in retirement. It's really valuable, and I know it's making a lot of people feel better.
Yeah, and I think if I could just say one more thing, if you're coming to Detroit, if you're going to be in Detroit, please come see us at the exhibit, which is on the just in front of Co-America Stadium and Gate A. If you're not here in Detroit or unable to come to the concert, please go on protectedincome.org. That would be fantastic and a good first step in getting a secure financial future.
Absolutely. Protectedincome.org is that website. Jean Statler, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. We will see you back here next time. Bye.